Okay, well,
if you want to.
you're right.
Yeah,
Okay,
all right.
Senator Thank you. And Senator Singh asked many of my questions on State of the Environment Report. Thank you, and thank you. I'm interested in the general state of information about biodiversity conservation, the state of the environment, all of the things that we know and all of the things we know we don't know. The program called Environmental Information Program, which is administered by BOM, they told me last night that, yes, that is now an ongoing program, albeit with slightly reduced funding, but not terribly much reduced. But they did mention that it wasn't focused on continental scale data collection. Is there anybody doing that work? Is that you, or are you aware of any body in government collecting data at that scale?
The Essential Environment Measures program that we're starting is teasing out that very question in terms of what are the available data sets and what are the impediments in the way it's formulated that can bring it together into continental scale information. It's a big task, and we're developing a framework around the biodiversity, as well as starting off with testing the water quality and the vegetation condition themes. Part of the State of the Environment report will involve a series of analysis papers up front, which are testing out the data that's available. So they will be published. We are doing those for all themes except the Antarctic, where in fact the subject matter is much more contained and we know where the information is. And the intent of those is actually to scope out the available data, who else may have information, explore it with the science community and see what the level of information is. No doubt there will be significant gaps in continental scale information. Okay,
so just so that I'm understanding you correctly, that sounds more like a lay of the land on what do we know and what have we identified that we don't yet know. Is there a process in place for filling those knowledge gaps once they're identified?
Through the NESP hubs, there will be research into biodiversity, threatened species, marine biodiversity, Northern Australia, but I still think that in terms of continental scale gathering of information on biodiversity, that will not fill the gaps.
Okay, so there's nothing in place yet to garner and continue to collate continental biodiversity information?
No, unless some of my colleagues from the relevant areas of the department have anything to add.
Not as a gap-filling exercise, Senator. As Ms Olsen said, we draw on a number of databases and a number of sources of information. We have ones which we are stewards of in the department, the SPRAT, whose name I can't remember.
Species something. Yep, I
that's
know
right.
what you mean.
And also the Atlas of Living Australia has become quite an important tool for us, both as somewhere we place data from projects that we fund, but also as a place for us to draw on data.
Okay. So I was going to ask how much funding and staff time is allocated to consolidating environmental information on a continental scale, particularly about biodiversity. Would you consider that you could describe the work that you've outlined as consolidating that information?
I would probably have to take that on notice. Okay. We have a number of staff involved in all of the databases that we referred to before. Yeah. We have staff involved in the Essential Measures program and in SOE, but it would be not possible for me off the top of my head to come up with a figure.
Thanks for taking that on notice.
I wouldn't describe it as consolidating. We look at these.
So you would or would not?
Would.
Okay.
It's when you look at the data sets that they put it on a spatial scale. It tells you what species are where, and that's a catalogue of that, and it's electronically available. So that is consolidating the data.
Great. Oh, well, thank you. If you can get me some figures on funding and staff time on notice. So again, just still on this theme, given that BOM yesterday was saying that's not their purview, and we've got some process of consolidation, but it's not clear that we've got new information being generated in any sort of systematic way, how then will we have up-to-date data on which to base the State of the Environment report on?
So do you mind before the answer? This data is updated on a regular basis and it draws on many different information sets. The information sets can come from conservation groups, they can come from our own work, they can come from Green Army or other things that are done through the department. So it's a very broad-based information collection. So I think actually it is a live and broad-based consolidation process that's updated regularly. So the Atlas of Living Australia, and Mr Thompson may go through some of that, but that draws on draws on new information that comes available on a regular basis, and it says where that information comes from, and talks about the quality of that information, how sure you can be, or how confident you can be about that. So,
Okay, so it sounds like we're like ad hoc filling the gaps, and that's better than not at all. But I was asking before about any sort of systemic program to identify and to, well, not to identify, but then to fill the knowledge gaps in terms of biodiversity on a continent-wide scale. And I thought you'd said, well, we're not really doing that systemically. And so,
Wright, head of the Science Division, there is a lot of systematic collection of information. The State of the Environment report draws on a broad range of information that comes from state and territories, from the private sector, from databases such as the Atlas of Living Australia. And these are updated on various timescales. For the State of the Environment report, which will be finished by December 2016, we're envisaging that will be much more of an online version, so that the data that is provided will be available to the public and researchers much more readily. You've been asking about biodiversity. Biodiversity is a very broad concept, and there's no one indicator. So the State of the Environment report's been to date some 900 pages long, because it has to cover such a broad field. So the research that Ms Olsen has been referring to define a set of environmental indicators is exactly that. It isn't a case of being able to go out and say, this is what we need, because it's such a broad area you could collect lots of data and it not be useful. So there are aspects that are being looked at, such as what is the surrogate for a healthy ecosystem, and there's some thinking that bird life could be one surrogate that will give you a very good indication. So that's work ongoing. So what we're seeking to do, and it is a targeted program, is to specifically identify what information would deliver most value and how to get it efficiently. So rather than just going out and collecting data, it's very, very structured, and we're road testing, as Ms Olsen said, 2 indicators to really get to grips with what is possible. And this hasn't been done before, so it's really the start of a journey, but it has a very specific goal in sight.
okay. Was that the water quality and vegetation conditions
Yes,
that you
that's
refer
correct.
to?
Yes.
Obviously, they're interrelated with biodiversity, but there'd be many more indicators that are perhaps more suited to measuring the health of biodiversity. How will we be able to adequately measure the state of health of biodiversity using those?
Well, there are a
slightly
broad range
mismatched
of indicators in terms of threatened species that are collected on a species-by-species basis. There's information that's being collected through a broad range of the department's programs, through 20 Million Trees, Green Army. We have a Threatened Species Commissioner. There's data that's actually sent back online through applications on how things are improving. So in fact, it could be said that there's a wealth of information. The problem is trying to make sense of that in a coherent way. And that's one of the reasons why the State of the Environment report is being dealt with on a themes basis, to try and make that much more granular and understandable.
Okay, thank you. I'll think on that and come back to you with some more specific questions. There was an external review of our environmental information gathering in 2012 by Morton and Tinney. Can you tell me if there were any actions taken as a result of that review?
Senator, I would need to take that question on notice.
Okay. All right, thank you. That's all I've got. Thank you, Chair.
Okay.